The Washington Wizards are tanking this season. That's probably an obvious statement to make. All you have to do is look at the standings to see that that is uh, presumably the case here. The Wizards are the worst team in the NBA by record. They went all of November without a single win, and they recently had a 16-game losing streak. So they are not really being all that subtle about it. The Wizards are attempting to lose as many games as possible. That's not really the point I'm making here. The point that I'm trying to make is just how good the Wizards are at losing as many games as they can. If you take a look at the statistics for the Wizards, they are last in the league in both offensive and defensive rating. In terms of their offense, they're bottom 5 in points, field goal percentage, three-pointers made, and three-point percentage. Looking on the defensive end, it's even worse. They're dead last in the league in points allowed. They're bottom 5 in field goals, field goal attempts, field goal percentage, three-pointers allowed, three-point percentage, free throws, free throw attempts, rebounds, and assists allowed. So, the offense is bad, the defense is worse. That's leading the Wizards to lose a lot of games, but these aren't close losses. These aren't games that they let get away from them, on the back end. They are losing consistently, and they are losing big. The average margin of loss for the Wizards, aka how many points they lose by on average, is 20 points so far on the season, and they have not lost a game by any fewer than 9 points so far. So the Wizards are losing incredibly consistently. The question is, how are they doing that, right? Is their roster just so much worse? Are they just that terrible of a team compared to the rest of the league that they're just losing all these games naturally? Not really, right? Almost certainly not the case here. There is a little bit of strategy coming into play for the Wizards, which feeds into the point that they're tanking better than we've seen other teams tank before. And there's really sort of two main steps for the Wizards in the tanking process here. Step one, limit who's actually available on any given night. The Washington Wizards injury report is a pretty extensive one. At the time of recording, I think they have 9 players listed on that injury report. Included amongst those 9 players are 4 players who are currently averaging double-digit points. So for some of those injuries that, they're legitimate. I don't think any of these are fake injuries, but the severity of them can maybe fluctuate on any given night. If a guy's borderline, technically speaking, he could play, but maybe you decide to be extra cautious and have him sit out that night. And if that just so happens to maybe help you lose a game, then it's to the Wizards' advantage. And we've seen some of their key players miss games so far this season. Jordan Poole's missed, I think, 2 games. Kyle Kuzma's missed around 10. Malcolm Brogdon's missed 13. And even some of the younger guys like Bilal Coulibaly, guys like Alex Sarr have missed, 1 or 2 games each. So when you can just straight up pull guys out of the lineup on some nights because of these injuries, it does help you lose those games. The second step is to take the guys that you do have available and sort of stagger your rotations and spread out your minutes as much as you reasonably can, right? The Wizards have 10 players on their roster averaging 20 or more minutes per game. That is slightly more than most teams in the league in terms of the number of players. And if you look at who's getting those minutes, it's a lot of the younger developing players, right? Bilal Coulibaly, Carlton Carrington, Alex Sarr, and Keyshawn George are all averaging 25 or more minutes per game. They're all under the age of 22, and they're all either rookies or in their second season. So, they're letting the young guys play, and that's kind of the point here. They're letting the young players play because they don't necessarily care about the outcome, and it's good to get experience for those younger guys. The methodology here for the Wizards is to play your starters just enough to not get the league angry at you, right? Not like a situation with maybe Joel Embiid in Philadelphia, where the league is looking into extended periods of absence. The Wizards are playing their starters just enough to avoid that scrutiny. Put your young guys out there and don't really care about the results, the offensive efficiency, the defense at all, right? That's the game plan. The Wizards have decided to tank, and they're committing hard to that. And in terms of win-loss, it's going to lead to very, very few wins, but that's the point, right? They're trying to maximize losses. They're trying to get as high a draft pick as possible. If you're looking at this from a silver lining, though, if you're looking for a positive spin on it, there is one, the potential for a higher draft pick. But in terms of the team now, you are getting to see a lot more of the team's young players, right? Guys that I mentioned earlier, Koulibaly, Sarr, Carrington, George, they're getting more experience. They're getting to see the floor a lot more than they would if the Wizards were maybe a more competitive team. Now, obviously, they're not all going to suddenly break out, those guys I mentioned. It could be that not even one of them sort of breaks out into a key piece or a star player. But the idea here is that since the team is tanking and since these guys are getting, more playing time, more run, you might get a better, more accurate or faster sort of impression of if and how those guys could contribute to the team in the future, right? The best example I could think of is the Rockets of maybe 4 to 5 years ago, right? There were a couple years in a row where they were basically the worst team or the second to worst team in the league by record. They were running all of their guys out there, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. And since they didn't care about whether they won or lost the game, they were able to evaluate some of those young guys a little bit faster, right? And the result now is that they have a better idea of which of those players are actually viable for their roster long term. That's what you would hope for here with the Wizards, that getting more playing time for these young guys will help you determine which of them will actually be building blocks for the eventual non-tanking version of this roster. So that's really the best that you can hope for. In the meantime, though, the Wizards are going to continue to lose quite a lot of games. But really, that's it. I just wanted to sort of talk about how efficiently they're losing. It's not a great, it's really not a great thing, but it was kind of statistically interesting. But let me know what you think. Do you believe this pays off? Do the Wizards get themselves a top 3 draft pick out of this tank job? Of those young players that I mentioned, right? Koulibaly, Sarr, Carrington, George. Which of them do you think is the most likely to be long-term pieces for this team? One of them, multiple, all of them maybe? What do you think about what you're seeing from those young players so far? But either way, please feel free to let me know what you think. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.